Is asexuality really an orientation? Well, sadly, many think not, even within the queer community. It's perfectly acceptable to be gay, lesbian or trans. Most don't bat an eyelid, which is such an amazing transition from only a couple of decades ago. But it's disappointing that saying you're asexual doesn't harness the same empathy or understanding. People in general find it very hard to grasp that we are void of sexual attraction. So much revolves around sex and the fascination with it that asexuality is still taboo. You very often are made feel that you are less of a person, an undesirable partner, or there's something missing if you are asexual. Just like those who experience sexual attraction seem to be unable to understand not having it, I, as asexual, do not understand the desire for sex. It's tiresome to constantly receive signals that you should be experiencing something that you don't. If you're asexual, you will have heard multitudes of times that you haven't met the right person. Well-meaning friends will try and set you up, but they don't realise that doing this is the equivalent of suggesting conversion therapy to someone who's gay. It's not always meant to be insulting or disrespectful, it's just ignorance, through lack of awareness, education and visibility. Because sex is considered across the board to be a thing of very high value, it's incredibly difficult for someone of any age or gender to say, I don't desire it or I don't want it. That's the thing. We don't need help to get laid, we just need to be considered as normal, like everyone else. Because the majority of people want sex as part of a relationship, it makes it more difficult to find a like-minded partner. Asexuality is not new by any means, but even people from my generation were conditioned to just comply with what was expected. I believe the number of asexuals are far higher if truth be told, but many have settled and just put up with the unpleasant act of sex as a compromise through coercion or because they didn't know that asexuality is a thing. You may hear the argument that asexuality is not an orientation but a psychological condition due to abuse in childhood, which isn't true. Some asexuals may have been abused, but that's true for all orientations. It doesn't always mean that they never want to have sex. Through therapy, they can have a very healthy relationship with sex. No amount of therapy can change you if you are asexual. Trust me, I've tried. Growing up in a very sexually repressed Ireland, it is true to say that I believe for years this negativity was the root of my own lack of sexual attraction. And it was through therapy and getting to know myself that I realised it wasn't. If that were the case, a lot more people would be in the same boat because we all grew up in that same backward thinking era. Even as I became more open-minded about sex, I still didn't desire it for myself. A misconception is that asexual people have never had sex. Lots of asexual people have sex, whether this be for the reasons above, like myself, or because they needed to fulfill their sex drive. This kind of threw me, as I didn't really get the difference between sex drive and sexual attraction for a long time, so I'll try and explain it in a way that I understand. Sex drive is hormonal. Biologically, we produce hormones that control the sex drive, so asexuals still function like any other human being. This sex drive is normally fueled by sexual attraction, so those that lack the sexual attraction part may have a lower sex drive, but not none at all. Asexuals, depending on where they are on the spectrum, may still fulfill that sex drive. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable to feel this need if the act of sex repulses you, and can lead to negative feelings towards yourself. The sex drive will fluctuate throughout your life with your changing hormones, especially during menopause for females. Being in menopause myself, I know that there are hundreds of thousands of women who have lost their sex drive and no longer desire sex, but I'm still different because they miss it. They want it back. I don't, because I don't miss what I never had. I do wonder sometimes what it's like to get turned on by the things other people get turned on by, or what all the hype is about. But I just don't get it, and I know I never will. That is the difference between being asexual and having sexual difficulties due to hormones, trauma or upbringing. All of the latter you can fix, but asexuality you can't. And why should we feel the need to be fixed? So to answer the question, yes, asexuality is an orientation. Ireland has been through its fair share of sexual revolutions in modern times. The murder of Declan Flynn and the acquittal of his attackers, which was our Stonewall moment, and the catalyst that harnessed mainstream outrage and desire for change, is something I remember well. Let's not forget being gay was against the law here until the 90s. Now we have marriage equality and gender recognition. Women have rights and control of their own bodies, who not long ago were chained to the sink at the mercy of their husband's wishes and thrown into homes should they be discovered to have engaged in sexual activity outside of marriage. It's time for all discrimination to end, and I want to see an asexual revolution. Asexuality and Me by Madrina Farrell. Asexuality is a pretty new concept for me, as it is for a lot of people, especially those in my age bracket. I was a teenager in the early 90s, attending an all-girls convent school in a border town in Ireland, and I really struggled to understand why the other girls were so obsessed with boys, or what exactly it meant to fancy someone. I wanted a connection, I wanted someone special, but I just wasn't attracted to anyone. I wasn't repulsed by the idea of sex, it just wasn't something that mattered to me. I was almost 22 before I had my first boyfriend. I had been very close friends with him for about 7 months before something switched in me, and we began a relationship. I met my hubby when I was almost 25 in 2001. Again, we were friends first, and another unexpected moment when something switched in me and I quickly fell in love with him. We have been together for 19 years and married for 17 of those. He is totally accepting of my asexuality and nothing has changed between us. I was 41 before I came across the term demisexual, about 3 years ago, and it was constantly a light bulb moment that sent me down an internet rabbit hole for weeks. I discovered a whole slightly overwhelming world of labels, but I immediately understood that I belonged under the asexual umbrella. Figuring out exactly where I was the challenge. However, the knowledge that I wasn't a freak and that other people had similar experiences was comforting. Initially, I was convinced I was demisexual. After all, I had been attracted to both my ex and to my husband. Eventually, after much soul searching and trying to figure out exactly what sexual attraction feels like, I landed on an identity that really fits for me. I am definitely asexual. I have never felt any sexual attraction. It turns out that I was mistaking romantic attraction for sexual attraction, and that took a while to figure out. The demi thing really confused me though. Why did I not feel attraction as soon as I saw the men that I fell in love with? Why did I need a strong connection first? I initially dismissed the idea of me being grey/demi-romantic because I am such a romantic junkie. I read a ridiculous amount of gay romance novels. In fact, it is thanks to one of those novels I came across the term demisexual. I love the idea of being in love, and that was always something that I wanted for myself. Eventually, the penny dropped, and I realised that I can love romance in general, but when it comes to actual romantic attraction, I am demi-romantic. Why is it important for me to have this label? While I always thought there was something wrong with me, my label is a way to finally claim my identity. It has given me a huge piece of the jigsaw of my personal identity and has made me much more comfortable in my own skin. Labels are not for everyone, but for me it was very freeing. I have become quite open about my sexual orientation, even if most people struggle with the concept. I grew up before Google. Yeah, I'm really that old. So my generation have almost no awareness of asexuality. It's a very, very new concept and very misunderstood. The internet is a powerful tool, and I do believe that it is very much helping our community to come together like never before. I am grateful that the younger generation, there is much more information readily available on all aspects of sexuality and gender. With any luck, the future is going to be much brighter for minority sexualities and gender identities.